Hello, everybody! Welcome to the 10th episode of the Warped Eye podcast.
I'm Coffee.
And I'm Macaron.
We are high school freshmen bringing you your weekly dose of educational randomness.
We missed last week because we wanted to enjoy our last week of summer, stress free.
Also, Macaron was on vacation, so I ain't running this podcast on my own, although maybe if you kidnap Macaron, that would happen. Actually, no, we don't. Never mind.
We don't talk about that. Okay, check out our bonus episode to make up for the missed episode. We'll be ranting about our first day of high school, which was today, as in the day we're recording the podcast, which is September 1st.
Yeah, so anyways, back to your regular scheduled programming. Today's episode is starting off with a what if question, and then we'll move on to talk about hustle culture. Today's what if question is what if we lived on/in the sun?
Okay, so we have two versions of the answer to this question. We have one version that is what average humans know and base it off of your knowledge already. And then the other version is stuff I bet you don't know unless you're really enthusiastic about this topic or you're a physicist or some kind of scientist, then maybe you'll know. Anyway, so I'll start with what you probably already know about the sun and build on that knowledge. So, if we lived on the sun, we would die, which is what you probably think is the answer to this question. What if you lived on the sun? You'll die. Exactly. Yeah. So, let's go through this step by step. Way number 1, the heat. It is more than 100,000 degrees Kelvin at the surface. And if you do not know what Kelvin is basically like another unit for temperature. Look up the conversion. Basically, this version is we die of heat strokes at just 323 Kelvin, right? So if it's 100,000 degrees Kelvin at the surface, then yeah, we die. And the sun's core is 15 million Kelvin, or so Google says. Our bodies would melt right off into a very large ball of gas and magma. So, yeah, we'd die by the heat. Second way to die. Even if we were able to create suits that could withstand these temperatures, where would you even live? Because the sun is just a huge expanding ball of gas and Earth's crust is solid. And if the sun has no specific crust except for the cooler upper layer of gaseous stuff, you basically just sink in and die. So, yeah. And then, third, suppose we still somehow colonize the sun, going through the heat barrier and the sinking in barrier, the sun is also like a hotbed for just random activity like solar flares and electromagnetic instability. Fancy, yeah. So, and gases could basically just overheat, and the sun could leash out massive solar flares that could disrupt entire colonies and wipe out pretty much everything that maybe would possibly stand in its way. So that's the third one. Then the fourth one is settling over what are called sunspots, which are cooler places on the sun. And this is also kind of dicey, as those because those spots could heat up in basically no time and could lead to the wiping out of all the colonizers. Yeah, so that's what you probably think.
Yeah,
Oh, and also, if somehow with all of these things we still survive, then here are some other difficulties. No water. We would not be able to play in the snow. When would we even sleep? It's always day, and we'd never be able to take our spacesuits off. Sigh. And then also, at least nuclear energy is available in the sun wherever you are, and also the sun is very large, so we'd have a lot of space to colonize. But that doesn't matter because we'll die, right? Right? Or so you think.
yes, now we are gonna be some cool nerds and totally debunk all of your knowledge
Yeah.
because our current knowledge of the sun is not accurate. So, we actually do not know the temperature of the sun, it's just an estimate. And the current model of the sun, according to more recent research in the field, it is actually not correct. So, this raises the possibility of actually being able to live on the sun. Wow, how amazing! So, let's see how the current model does not fit the real-time data. Using common sense, if the sun is a super hot ball of gas and it's like the hottest at its core, and like the sun's core is like doing nuclear fusion or whatever to emit all of this energy outward, then that must mean that things that are closer to the sun would be hotter. But that is not necessarily true, because if you think about Mercury, which is the closest planet to the sun, it actually has like below freezing temperatures. And if you went with the current model of the sun and the way it emits energy, then Mercury should be like a baked ball of planetness. It's not gonna be below freezing. Like, that just does not make sense. And also, according to this model, that the core is the hottest and the core is making the energy. Well, you can't make energy, but like the sun, the core is the hottest, the outside, the outermost layer should be cooler. Like, if the surface is like millions of degrees, then the core is like billions of degrees. It's not, but like, just take my analogy. But according to actual data, the inner layers of the sun are actually cooler than the outer layers of the sun. And what does this imply? This implies that all like the stuff the sun is emitting comes from the outer layers of the sun, not the core. So, this proposes a new model of the sun. The energy and the light the sun is emitting actually comes from these things called electric arcs. These electric arcs are electrical breakdowns of gas that produce prolonged electrical discharge. If you ask me what the heck that means,
Hold on.
I do not know.
Electrical discharge is a phrase? That's concerning.
I'm sorry if you're bored by all the science, but we will get to the answer of the water question soon. Hang in there. But this theory of electric arcs basically says that the universe is made of plasma. And there are things called Birkeland currents flowing through the vacuum space in this universe. And these currents are named after the scientist Alvar Birkeland, who did a lot of work on the aurora borealis. And basically, flowing through the vacuum, these currents are pretty weak, like on their own. But once they collide with an object, they become very strong and they concentrate on this object, and this concentration creates voltage, which is electric potential energy. Are you getting PTSD from your physics class yet? Where does this voltage come from, specifically in the case of the sun? So, according to a source that I watched on YouTube, it's very reliable, I'm sure. The sun is positively charged, but these Birkeland currents moving through the universe are negatively charged. So they are concentrating around the sun, but the sun's atmosphere is separating the sun's positive charginess from the negative charge outside.
Positive charginess. That's such a
Yes,
good
I
phrase.
need to go teach physics class now. I'm gonna get like teacher of the year. But anyways,
Oh yes, I'd love to have coffee as my teacher, my physics teacher. I think life would be way more
Thank
interesting.
you. I'll take the compliment. But if you remember what I was talking about and your brain is not fried yet, this separation of the sun's positive charginess and the negative charge creates voltage, and this voltage generates these electric arcs. I don't know if I completely butchered that theory and told it in a way that is completely inaccurate, but basically this means that you could actually live inside the sun if you get past these electric arcs somehow. To further this possibility of actually being able to live in the sun, in 1995, a British scientist discovered that below the sun's atmosphere, the sun is actually solid. So this means the sun is not a ball of gas and you would not completely sink through and turn into a pile of gooey human liquid. I mean, maybe it would evaporate, but that's irrelevant. So, what evidence do we have for the sun being solid? Well, if the sun was a huge ball of gas and you accepted the electric arc theory I was talking about, the electric arcs, this is like a side note, the electric arcs, there are a lot of them on the sun. That's how you get so much energy. Uh, and each of them are emitting a magnetic field. And since there's so many magnetic fields, it makes it very unstable. And if the sun was a ball of gas, then these unstable magnetic fields would make the shape of the sun unstable as well. But for your entire life, I bet you have always seen the sun as a sphere. The shape is clearly stable. So the scientists are hypothesizing that there's actually solid stuff underneath. So we could go and live on the solid stuff. But obviously that still isn't very realistic because where are you gonna get water and it's always daytime there. We're gonna have to revamp our whole clock system, I guess.
Yeah, our time would be so off.
We have some gossip for you. Some juicy NASA gossip. This is more evidence for the idea that our current measurement of the sun's temperature is an inaccurate estimate. So basically, according to leaked knowledge, NASA in 1998 measured the sun's surface temperature and it's actually only 27 degrees. And don't ask me for units because my source did not give units. In any unit that is very low, it is not millions of degrees Kelvin. But according to the source I saw, NASA did not reveal this information because if they did, then that would totally disprove the entire physicsness published out there. So this knowledge came out because this Japanese scientist that used to work for NASA said it. So and now we're saying it. So NASA,
Look at us
don't
gossiping.
hunt us down. We don't have money for lawsuits, okay? And why are you hiding the truth from the public? Geez, why are you misinforming scientific education? Anyways, that's all for the what if.
Yes. All right. Now, on to discussing our main segment, which will be focusing on the social issue of hustle culture, specifically in America. All right. So, first, let's talk about what we mean when we talk about hustle culture. So, hustle culture loosely defined as the lifestyle where one overworks themselves just to earn more respect, particularly in the workplace, and respect also more achievements in a shorter amount of time. It's similar to toxic productivity in that it teaches you that you must be productive every second of every day, and if you do not do this, you will never be successful. And it says that if you're not working overtime, you're basically not even working. And it's the mindset that you always have to do more to be more worthy. And so the newspaper The Atlantic says hustling is the surrender of everything to market forces and the sacrifice of life to consumer culture is an energizing and often enriching enterprise, but it is ultimately empty, depressing, and destructive. Unquote. So this basically is just saying that it basically drains you, this hustle culture. And we talked about toxic productivity in another episode. So some of the manifestations of hustle culture actually does happen and is framed in toxic productivity as well. But hustling is particularly for people who are already working. But it's also come from a similar place. So toxic productivity basically comes from hustle culture itself. So that's why we're talking about it in a main segment and not really like a productivity corner segment. So, where does this culture even come from? Hustle culture can actually be traced to more or less the late 19th century in America, and we're talking specifically in America. So I'm not going to go about other countries. I'm sure they have their own cultures, but that's a lot of countries. So no. So to hustle at the time of the late 19th century meant to work really, really hard. And this is specifically concerning African Americans at that time. It was just coming out of the Civil War, I believe, too. So it was a lot. a lot was happening in America. The newspaper The Daily Star says, quote, recent times have seen a significant rise in this culture of putting work above everything else and putting everything you have into working hard, unquote. So this is also what was happening in that time in America. So people were overworking themselves to get more products. And at the time it made sense because at the time it was directly correlated. The more you worked on the farm, the better the crops would come out, right? Or the more crops that you would have if you planted more or whatever, It was directly correlated at the time. And so it made sense back in the 19th century, but that does not necessarily mean that you have to overwork yourself. And we'll get to that later. But according to David Mascriota in The Atlantic, quote, America is essentially about hustling, and that goes back more than 400 years. It's practically genetic in the US by now. The programming is so deep and so much out of consciousness awareness that very few Americans can break free of it. They're really sleepwalking through life, living out a narrative that is not of their own making, while thinking they are in the driver's seat. Unquote. So this basically means literally all Americans at this point, if they take their career seriously, that basically means that they are overworking themselves. And until they learn how to manage their time properly, like in how to create more in less time and how to create meaningful work instead of just working a lot, because you can be working a lot, but you can be producing the same amount as someone who works way less than you. There's a great book called The 4 Hour Work Week by Mark Manson. I think no, Mark Manson created The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F, but that's a different book. But The 4 Hour Work Week was by Tim Ferriss. Tim Ferriss, that's the guy. Basically teaches he worked a minimum wage job and worked terrible hours. They would have to clock in 40 hours a week, but no one clocked in as much as they worked. They maybe clocked in 2/3 of what they actually worked. So you do work way more than what you clock in. So at the surface level, it may look like the workers aren't really doing much, but they're working so incredibly hard. And for what? They get paid less and they don't even get that much respect at the end of the day, right? So the whole point of hustle culture, it made sense from where it came from. Like the harder you work, the more you produced, and that led to more money. So it was a very correlated graph. In today's world, it's not the case because it's how much meaningful work you produce. I mean, unless you're a farmer, that still makes sense for you, I guess. Just don't overwork yourself to the point of death. Please don't. But like in most jobs today, it's more about meaningful work rather than how much you work. It's also productivity. You can like keep taking notes on a textbook, but you won't absorb as much information. Like the type of thing that you are doing will it'll vary more in what you're doing than how much you're doing something of, right?
Yeah, so since this culture is like so embedded in American people, like there are many manifestations of this culture that you can see in everyday life. And like, I bet as I list these manifestations, most of y'all are gonna relate to it pretty well, because personally, I did. But the first manifestation, which is, I think this might be kind of a stretch, but I think the way many people neglect their health and put it towards the bottom of their priority list can sort of be attributed to hustle culture, because like in hustle culture you're always like trying to work hard and trying to put in lots of hours so you can get lots of results, and it's this very straightforward, like almost closed-minded, like you got your shutters on mindset of
Yeah.
trying to get results, and it's very results obsessed. So the problem is health is not something that you can just work on once and then you have great results for life. It's a continual process, and the results are slow. If like you can probably understand, trying to build like a strong body like takes months or years even. So since you don't see how this is bringing you something that can be quickly materialized, then you just don't work on it at all. And like you would rather check something off your to-do list or something to feel more productive. Like, yeah, I did something today and I got something today. And this sort of shows how hustle culture is sort of related to materialism, where the more things you produce, the better you feel. And another manifestation of hustle culture would be multitasking. Like, we take so much pride in multitasking. Like, it's like cool to be like, oh, I'm doing my homework, but texting like 3 people at the same time and posting on Instagram. Like, bro, chill. That's not helpful. And the thing with the multitasking, its appeal is that you are getting more done in a shorter amount of time. Supposedly, you are, but like, you really aren't. But like, if you are so deeply embedded in this hustle culture, then multitasking is like awesome, because like you are working hard like 3 times the amount in the same amount of time. Like, whoa. But no. A fourth, can I count? Maybe not. A fourth manifestation of hustle culture and its whole aspect of prioritizing work over everything else is how we seek convenience in aspects of our lives that are not work, like ordering like takeout or something so you can eat while you work, and so you don't have to take the time to prepare food. Like, drop a like if that is you. I bet a lot of people are going to be liking this episode. But this is an example of neglecting areas of your life, again, that you don't see quickly producing something, and you just want to put all of your effort into your work. And that is very draining, like Macaron said before. And another one, this list is getting long. So another one is having unclear boundaries in your daily life between your work and your leisure time. This might not be very obvious, but you see so much advice out there that's like your hobby should be providing some sort of practical advantage to you. Like you should try out a hobby that makes you money. It's practical advice, but it's not bad necessarily. Just like as an impartial observation, I'm saying that this really reflects hustle culture where you're even taking time that's supposed to be time for you to rest. You're literally like slapping on the label of a hobby, but in reality, you are looking for another way to work more. And you might even think that if this does not produce something like money, this hobby is not worthwhile or practical to do. And that, my friend, is such a trademark mindset of hustle culture, thinking that it doesn't produce, it doesn't create like more than you would expect, then it's not worthwhile. Just like how so many people have low self esteem and trouble accepting themselves as they are, like you always think, I have to be more than who I was born as. Like, just me is not enough. I gotta be more. I gotta do more. I gotta like achieve more. And only then will I deserve respect and feel worthy. But as I say this out loud, you realize how toxic this is.
Yeah. Okay. So now we'll talk about the effects of hustle culture on individual Americans and how it affects them in the workplace and how it affects just the environment in a certain workplace. So hustle culture, as expected, ends up causing extreme burnout in addition to just plain exhaustion every day after work. The WHO, or the World Health Organization, they say that it is, quote, a syndrome conceptualized as resulting from chronic workplace stress and has not been successfully managed, unquote. So that is what the WHO says burnout is. It is a syndrome. It is not just like a thing that happens to everyone. It's actually, I mean, it does happen to everyone, but still, it's serious. It's to learn a lesson every time you get a burnout. Like you're doing too much or you're doing the wrong thing. And as a result from burnout, workers get extremely pessimistic and annoyed at their own work. And in addition to the lower levels of motivation and energy that anyways comes from burnout, this pessimism basically ends in declining in the results of the production and everything in their performance at work. Like the quality of work goes down, the results go down, everything goes down. So all of this combined, so the burnout basically leads to this anyways. And the Daily Star quotes Dr. M. Tasdiq Hassan, a global mental health researcher, who said, quote, "The direct link between overworking and mental health is still unestablished. Such exhausting schedules may lead to disruption in the biological rhythm of the body and can have significant efforts on work efficiency, sleep patterns, mental health, psychological or behavioral changes, stress, depression, type 2 diabetes, reproductive outcome, obesity, hypertension, and developing cerebral cardiovascular complications." That, unquote, that is a long list of side effects from burnout. Okay. All of this overworking can actually cause all of these problems in your health. So if you think overworking is like it's fine, it's just for this little amount, it will keep going on. It's a habit. You have formed that habit of overworking. And all of this toxic productivity and hustle culture mindset seeping into your brain, seeping into that cerebrospinal fluid, and that will eventually cause your physical health to go down. I think everyone knows that their mental health is linked to their physical health, whether it's like proven or not. Like, you get stressed, you get a headache, or maybe you get a stomach ache, or maybe like your jaw tenses up real bad, like mine does. It does affect your body, and all of that over a while can cause all of these problems that Dr. Hassan just said. And hustle culture can also cause competition in the workplace. And while, of course, some competition is healthy and encouraging, the hustle culture lifestyle and mindset that people have, it ends up leading to very, very toxic levels of competitiveness, and eventually it starts to hamper the company's overall productivity as the culture strives to put other people down to get ahead. It's a very self-centered, individualistic nature. Maybe that's where the individualism of like America comes from, hustle culture. Because like, have we just made a big breakthrough here? I think this hustle culture, like it sets in. It really does. I mean, other than of course the core foundation on what America was built on, as we're constantly taught. I think this whole hustle culture thing, it definitely creates an individualistic mindset and putting other people down to get further in your own career path or your own path
Maybe
of life,
capitalism too.
And yeah, it it creates capitalism. Capitalism just. Let's not talk about that. That's a story for another time. Um, Hustle culture has also affected the atmosphere of educational institutes. For example, many high school students or their parents maybe push them to do this. They pile on tons of extracurriculars since they always feel like their amount of work or productivity is never enough. And I bet a lot of fellow high schoolers now can relate to this, especially ones that are this career oriented. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably are, because you probably relate to us and find our humor interesting. If you find our humor interesting, then it's probably because you're like us. Back to what the Daily Star said. The Daily Star quotes Zareen Fariha, who is a university student. They say, quote, I used to tend to associate productivity with the number of hours I was putting in for work per day. There were days when I would stay up all night to cater to tasks for various occasions in different places, as the mentality of, quote, more work equals more efficiency, unquote, had completely grasped me. Then, having burnout now and then took a heavy toll on me, and I felt there was no energy left in me to go on with my daily activities as usual, which largely included my academic pursuits as well, unquote. I bet a lot of us can relate to this. I mean, I know that we both used Clockify to track our productivity, and like, we thought it was a great idea at the time, and even then we were aware of burnout, and we had both experienced burnout at that point, I think. Maybe not extreme burnout, but at least some level of burnout. But even then, we thought it was a good idea. Like, now we can see how much we were working. But then every time I worked less than the previous day, I always felt so stressed out. Like, my productivity is going down. I'm gonna fail life. It's it's a bad habit to get into. And you don't always have to keep outdoing yourself. Like, that's a problem, individualistic nature, and also the fact that I guess you're individualistic to your past self. Give your past self a break. They just tried really hard. Now you deserve a break. They worked hard so you can get a break. Yeah. Don't let your past self down, guys. you know? Yeah. So that's basically how hustle culture has affected all of you. And you don't
Yeah,
even
it
know
has
it.
like the opposite effects of what you would think it would have, because it appeals to you like, oh, you can get more work done in less time, and if you just put in ungodly amounts of hard work, you are gonna get amazing results. But as they say, if something sounds good, too good to be true, it probably is, and hustle culture is one of those sketchy products that you don't want to get scammed by. And now that we've pointed out problems in your life, let us tell you how to fix it. I mean, there's no one quick fix way to break away from hustle culture, and especially if you live in America and you've literally grown up with this culture, it's gonna be very difficult. But according to the Daily Star, who is like our best friend now, this quote, the first change you can implement is the most obvious. Schedule your day such that you get enough sleep. As per an article by Harvard Business Review, only 1 to 3% of the population can sleep for only 5 to 6 hours each night. Without the lack of sufficient sleep affecting their performance, it is possible, but unlikely that you are among the 1 to 3%. So do not neglect your sleep. This goes back to one of the manifestations of hustle culture where you are neglecting your health. Your health does not deserve to be neglected. Do not do yourself like that. And you should also block time for activities that you must do every day or activities that you want to do every day so you can make sure that your day doesn't just get swallowed by all of this work. So you want to block time for things like exercising, family time, self-care activities, etc. And to help with this, you want to plan aspects of your life that are not work first, like planning your sleep first, planning your meals first. So you're making your work for you. You know? Like, does that make sense?
Yes, I do know. Yes.
Okay. And when you are working, you have to remember that you need to take breaks. Breaks are like the savior of your life, and they help prevent burnout and all of the side effects. Not all. Maybe I am marketing a little too aggressively here, but they will help prevent the side effects of hustle culture. You also want to take breaks because it actually helps your productivity. It's not something hindering your productivity, which is something you should know if you watched our episode. Listen to our episode with toxic productivity. And the main goal of doing all of this is to not attach your happiness with some tangibly measurable object, something that you can produce right now, right here. You just want to live in the moment and not be so obsessed with the results. And I know this is a very lofty goal to strive for, having this great mindset where you can break free from hustle culture. But I hope we provide you with some simple steps that you can start with right now to
Yeah.
break away from hustle culture and all of the negativity. And wow, don't you think I could be a great salesperson? Are you sold on breaking away from hustle culture?
Yes, you could be a great motivational speaker too. It'll be wonderful. I'd attend every
Thank
one of your
you.
speeches, you know.
Yes. But anyways, that's all for the relatively long episode we had today because we were oddly passionate about living on the sun in hustle culture.
It
And
was so funny. I was not even passionate about this whole thing earlier before I researched, and then I found all of those Daily Star quotes that made me think, you know.
yes, and that's how you know you have good podcast content. It makes you think about stuff that you wouldn't think about if it weren't for us. Oh my god, way to be self-confident. Yeah, we're great. And you are great too. So goodbye and have a good life.